Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kim Bussey. I am the Key Relationship Manager here with Omnia. Want to do a quick sound check. If you can hear me, go ahead and raise your hand. There is an icon at the top where you can raise your hand. If you agree or disagree with me, let me know. If you need me to speak up or speak a little bit softer, let me know, or speed up or slow down. And as always, laughter and applause is always appreciated. Also, just to let you know, make sure that you follow us on our social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook to receive notifications of when the webinar recording is ready. We house all of our webinars recordings on our YouTube channel, so subscribe to us, as well as there will be a download of this presentation available at the end. So if you are frantically taking notes, go ahead and just sit back, relax. Don't have to write down everything that I'm saying, although it's going to be great. At least I think so. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. So in our lobby, while we were waiting, I had two questions up. One, have you ever been disengaged? And two, do you think you have disengaged employees working for you? And absolutely, overwhelmingly, we've all felt, we had about 76% of us say, yes, at one time or another, I've been disengaged. And about 73% of all of the attendees have said, I'm pretty sure I have someone who's disengaged right now working for me. But really, what does engagement mean? Well, let's start off by saying engaged employees are involved. They're enthusiastic about their job. They're committed. And that commitment may show in working late, fully being engaged, doing whatever it takes, and they are a driving force for the business. Now, this is going to be a very interactive webinar, so there will be some polls popping up. Make sure that you attend with us as well. And so we're going to start off with a quick question. What percent of new employees do you think quit within the first 18 months? Is it 10%, 25, 72, 46? And then go ahead and let me know how disengaged employees cost companies X amount of dollars annually. Is it millions, billions, or trillions? And you may be thinking, Kim, where are you going with this, really? But we're going to talk about that cost of engagement and why it's so important. And really, engagement, there's two schools of thought. Some of it is, oh, it's that warm and fuzzy feeling that people like to work for us, and it's the extra perks and positions and the parties and the fun dress down days, and that's not really our culture. But employee engagement is so much more than that. And it affects companies' bottom line because actually 46% of all new employees quit within the first 18 months. And 89% of these failures are due to poor culture fit. The new employee doesn't feel engaged. They don't feel wanted. And then absolutely, so about 64% of you said that it cost companies billions. It does. Latest Gallup polls show that disengaged employees cost companies between $450 and $550 billion annually. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that when you start factoring in the time and the energy and the effort, and then to lose someone within the first 18 months because of disengagement, and then also the cost of the company is mind-boggling. So why engage? Where per Gallup, their 2014 report, 87% worldwide workers are disengaged. Means only 13% of your workers are engaged worldwide. In the US, we have a little bit better statistics on that. Disengaged employees is 69%. Engaged employees is about 31%. What does it mean? Your engaged employees are your driving force of your business. They are the people who care, who want to see your company succeed. So if average of about only 30% of your workforce is engaged, you're wasting about 70% of your payroll. Now, I'm not saying go and fire people because that's definitely not what we want to do. But what we want to talk about is what today is why are they disengaged and what we can do about it. And you're probably thinking, okay, seriously, Kim, percents are great, doesn't mean a whole lot to me. So let's put it into practice. If you have 10 employees that earn $35,000 annually, that's a payroll budget of $350,000. If only 30% is driving the business because 30% of your employees are engaged, $245,000 of your annual payroll is being wasted on disengaged employees. So the question I want to ask you is, can you afford to throw that money away? And if you manage employees that are in sales or service, that engagement percent is even less. So if it's a service industry, engagement is only about 27.9%. And if it's sales, which our sales team typically drives the business, it's at 29.2%. So what do we do about that? We cannot relegate employee engagement to a simple fact of, oh, yeah, it sounds good, but I can't waste money on it. You can't afford not to worry about employee engagement. I'm going to go to a poll, another quick poll. As I'm doing that, if you have any comments or questions as we go along, please go ahead and type them in the box. Love to address them as we move forward as well and to hear your thoughts and sharing. So real quick, is engagement defined by the generation? And we hear that quite a bit of, oh, there are certain generations that are more engaged than the others. And if you think engagement is defined by generation, which generation is the most disengaged? Is it the traditionalist or the baby boomers? Maybe it's Gen X or the millennials. What are your thoughts? Well, overwhelmingly, we say false. Engagement is not defined by generations, and you're absolutely correct. We do tend to see a little bit of disengagement in the differences, but it's not as generational as some people assume. And then which generation is the most disengaged? Overwhelmingly, we see it's the millennials, which when you think about it, according to the survey says millennials, but when you think about it, why do we feel that way? Our traditionalists are aging early retirement. Some of our baby boomers are looking at that as well. And while millennials do have a little bit higher of that whole let me be disengaged, it's actually the traditionalist. Now, we could say it's because they are aging out. They see retirement, the travels, I've put in my time to move on. But what we tend to see is that engagement is different per generation. Now, I don't want you to get focused on a number because the number is not correct. There are certain behaviors, there are certain aspects of an employee that doesn't depend on if they're young or old. Work ethic. Do they feel comfortable in that position? Do they have those necessary behavioral traits that are necessary to be successful in that role? And then some of it is culture. With traditionalists, they were brought up is that you work a job, you have strong work ethic, you do what you need to do. It doesn't matter whether or not you like the job as much as it is about providing for the family. For baby boomers, they have that strong ethic. They wanted to make sure that things are happening, making those presentations, having that prestige in that position. Many of them are now retiring at an earlier age to move forward into opening their own business. For the Gen Xers, which is what I am, we were the latchkey kids. We kind of took care of everything ourselves. So we're defined by having a little bit of that independence. And also think of the technology that has occurred in the past decades. For myself, I remember using a typewriter and not having a computer. Or when having a cell phone was when it was actually a car phone with in the back that plugged into your lighter. How many of you can remember those as well? Was an exception and not the norm. And now we have the millennials who are, some people say, okay, they're entitled. They have this sense of entitlement. It's not necessarily that sense of entitlement, but they're used to different motivators. They're so technology driven that give me quick information and micro minds. If it's not 140 characters or less, then I may not be able to respond to it. Whereas your traditional list and your baby boomers like that face-to-face contact. Your Gen Xers can go both ways. They have that technology aspect, but they also understand that, you know, email's great, but face to there's a lost art in communication. How you're engaging them is very different. And some people say, oh, well, I can't handle managing people this way. But you also have to look at the person and their behaviors. Regardless of their generation, what drives them? What motivates them? Is it that competitiveness? Is it that relational mentorship? Is it the ability to jump from task to task or to have the freedom to build their own structure? We have to understand those, and then we have to understand the roots of disengagement. Now, there's several roots of disengagement. It could be everything from the job just not meeting the expectations. And many times our millennials and our Gen Xers are more likely to jump quicker because they have that freedom. But also the roots of disengagement start with a poor cultural fit. Remember 89% of those new employees that quit within 18 months is due to a poor culture fit. There's a lack of clarity not only of their role, but of what their expectations and also their future career paths. Many times people feel like, oh, I'm just a number, and no one wants to be just a number. There's a lack of credibility with leadership. I'm going to tell you what I say. Do what I say, not what I do. And general unhappiness and no feedback. And then a loss of control. So think about your personal life. You can come and go as you please, manage your technology, make purchases without approval, wake up when you want to, eat where you want to, make your own decisions. You are the captain of your fate. Now, think of your workplace. You have guidelines and policies and procedures, goals to be met, workplaces, time, hours that you have to be at the job. Unless you are the senior leadership or the owner of the company, you don't have that complete freedom. And so, really, the root of disengagement can fall really into leadership. If there's poor leadership, it's going to make that lack of credibility, that unhappiness. There's that loss of control of not having that freedom to do what needs to be done. And you may say, okay, yeah, Kim, this engagement's all going back to leadership. Let's hear what some employees say. I was happy there 2 years ago, but my manager left and my new manager was not a good mentor or coach. She was just coasting to retirement, but she was moody and unprofessional. And then one day she yelled at me. I went to her manager about it, but she just excused her behavior, saying that's just the way she is. That was the last straw for me. Have we ever felt that way? Or worked with someone that you go to a leader and say, I need some help. I've tried to address it, or maybe they're your direct supervisor and there's some conflict between us and it's just excused. That's just the way she is. You just have to deal with it. It leads to that loss of control, and it also leads to lack of communication. What I'm saying isn't being heard, or the other person is more valuable than I am. The second one is a sales manager said that when he was promoted, no letter went out announcing the promotion, which he took as a personal slight. We all work really, really hard. We want that recognition. And it doesn't have to be the parade through the office. Some of us will love that. Some of us are like, oh, please don't do that. Send out an email, but something to say, congratulations, Carrie, great job. You have been promoted. Not only is it celebrating a win, but it's also setting a clear expectation on the next role. Remember, a lack of clarity is one of those roots of disengagement. So when someone's promoted and it's not recognized, then there's that disconnect of why should I listen to you because you're really not my boss? Well, yeah, I am your boss. It just wasn't announced. It sets up that new manager for disengagement and failure as well as their employees. And the third one is my managers made it very clear they didn't want my input. They could have made such good use of my foreign language ability, but I got the cold shoulder. They had an old boy network mindset. I went to a national company meeting because my manager couldn't attend. It was 95% male, and no one even came up and introduced themselves. That did it for me. After that, I started looking and I had a new job in 6 weeks. So, for your actively disengaged employees, here's the thing: if they're top talent, they're going to find another job. If they're not top talent, then they may be willing to stay there, but they're not going to engage. They're not going to be committed. They're not going to be that driving force. And then not only are they not producing to cover their salary, but they're draining the company of resources. What's the common theme in these three comments? It's leadership. So, how you lead is critical for employee engagement. But you have to know yourself. You have to know how you lead. You have to understand your level of assertiveness. So, ask yourself, how driven am I? Am I open to other people's input? Do others sometimes think I'm a bully? You have to understand how you communicate. Do you like people or facts? How do you motivate your team? What energizes you? And then how do you communicate those changes well? How fast do you expect results? Those are key. Are you setting unrealistic expectations for your team? And if you are you causing them stress? And then leaders, knowing yourself is the big picture. Can you give them that amount of detail that they need? Are you focused more on just, figure it out? Understanding what's important to you as a leader is going to assist in helping your team. Think about a time in your career where you felt unimportant. We've all had them. And this is kind of Vegas. What's said here stays here on the webinar. So why did you think that why why did you feel unimportant? Go ahead and type it in, share, let us know. I know for myself, there was a time where I worked for a financial institute who had just been bought out and brought in the largest commercial loan. It was over 4 million, is the biggest that was ever done in the state of Florida. And during the course of that great relationship, what happened is I was told you didn't meet this $250,000 small business loan goal. I brought in the biggest lending and deposit relationship in the state of Florida. And my supervisor was more worried about a $250,000 goal than the goal that I exceeded by like 1,000 times. For myself personally, I felt like, you know what? I can't, I've exceeded all expectations, and now I'm being told you're still not good enough. What I'm seeing is feedback. My opinion wasn't heard. The feedback was never considered. Lori is sharing, in my generation, women were to be seen and not heard. It's true. Maybe, and it's not just by gender, but maybe it's by generation. There's a great movie out, I'm dying to see, called The Intern with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway. And the intern, Robert De Niro plays the intern. Now, you would expect it to be a little bit backwards, right? So he's older, more distinguished. But he goes to work for a CEO and Anne Hathaway. And the relationship in the movie is all about how they actually mentor each other. Even though technically she's his boss, he does some reverse mentoring and shares his wisdom and his expertise. She's able to teach him how to go on Facebook and social media and some other things. So understanding that in generations, sometimes we are fighting that generational gap. Sometimes it's that gender gap. Love that we had people that were moved to a different position and that was moved to a position that was part of my job. Absolutely. So someone comes in with a higher degree and they take it. So your work experience is ignored. Degrees are wonderful, but it doesn't absolutely mean that that's the end all be all. And it's always difficult when you have a new senior level management come on board. Sometimes executive leadership has an idea of which way to go, and so they start forging the way, and there's a lack of communication. And that's key. Sometimes a new driving force is needed, but the communication, and sometimes the communication is, I don't really know where we're going yet, but we're going to get to this goal. This is the goal that we're shooting for. Remember, lack of clarity. If there's no communication, there's no clarity, and absolutely taken for granted. And Charlie, you're absolutely correct. There's always an end goal in mind. Everyone contributes to it, so everyone has to change. You can't be so involved with engaging the people and the employees that you lose sight of the goal. But what you can do is use the employee engagement to drive us to the goal. Carrie works with me. I'm going to ask her to chime in the chat box. If you know me, I feel like I'm a great relationship people. Love talking to people. Love being motivated, finding out what's going on. First person to praise someone. I am also the absolute first person to say, we've got a goal, get to work. And also to say, I like you as a person, but you're not doing your job. We have to work it together. It's a balance. You can't be so focused on the goal that you lose sight of the people, and you can't lose sight of the people to get the goal. As leaders, to drive that employee engagement, you have to do three things. You have to connect, you have to influence, and you have to engage them. And you'll see that this looks as a cycle. There is a reason that there is a cycle because this is not a one and done. It's something that we have to continue to do. It's something that we have to continue to focus on as you bring in new people, as your employees are moving to a new level, maybe you have new managers coming in, the goals change because let's face it, our business today is not the same as it was 2 years ago, and it probably won't be the same as it is 2 years from now. Our world is changing. As leaders, we have to adapt to it. We have to know ourselves. So to influence that engagement, you have to connect with your team. You have to influence them. You have to engage them, and you can't stop. Remember, engaged employees are involved, connected, and a driving force. You drive the bus. So how do you connect? Well, we offer the Omnia assessment. Know yourself through the leadership report. Know your employees through the professional development. Allows you to see where you're alike, where you're different, how you can coach them. Once you know yourself and your style as a leader, you have to connect. Engaged leaders engage employees. So the first thing is communicate. You have to communicate with your team. Okay, so I'm going to assume everybody is at your desk. Go ahead, take out a piece of paper and a pencil. We're going to have a little writing exercise. No one can see it. What I want you to do is to draw a circle on your paper. At the top of the circle, draw. Did your picture look like this? How many of your pictures look like that? Raise your hand. 2 people. Woohoo! How many had something that looked completely different? Maybe a Mickey Mouse. I've seen a snowman. Anybody have someone who looked different? I see more hands. So for myself, I thought my communication was great. Draw a circle. At the top, draw 2 more circles. In the middle, draw a circle. At the bottom, draw a half circle. I knew exactly where I wanted you to go. But people didn't get there. Now, in the chat box, go ahead and just type a couple of, for those of you who got something different, tell me how you felt or what your first reaction is when you saw this picture. Were you like, I missed the mark, or how in the world did she get that, or darn, or whatever it may be? So I see hands typing all over the place. How did she get that? I love that. I wasn't clear. It was efficient. You got very quick bullet points. Hey, let's get down to business, right? Boom, 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 boom. But I love that. I didn't understand what you were asking. I couldn't imagine. Cherry's like, where are we going with this? What are we doing here? Think about it. What's the purpose of it? As we start talking about this, as we're looking at this, as a leader, to connect, you have to communicate clearly. Just because it's in your mind doesn't mean that everybody else can see it. Roots of disengagement is that lack of clarity. Remember that. I'm going to hone in on that a lot. A lack of credibility. So if what you say doesn't match what you mean, it's going to lead to disengagement. You have to care about your people. Now, I'm not talking about being their best friends, because that's absolutely can't happen, not going to happen. For some companies, it's great. For other companies, it's a recipe for disaster. But with caring about people, John Maxwell leads great leadership author, big fan of his, but he talks about the 5 levels of leadership. So all leaders start off at the same level, which is position. We're a leader because we have the title that says we're a leader. However, the next level is more that relational leadership. People leave people, they don't leave jobs. Think back to the comments that I said about people who left their job. I wasn't recognized because of my promotion. My manager was moody and I didn't get any type of reinforcement. Nobody talked to me. Those people felt that their leaders didn't care. How can you expect an employee to be engaged and to be a driving force when they feel like their leaders don't care about their work effort? And you may have the strongest work ethic around, but there's going to be those days that you're disengaged. Because if they don't care, why should I? Engaged leaders have to engage employees with the vision. So thinking back to the face, if I had said, I'm going to walk you through and we're going to create a face. Even if my details were a little bit, too at the top, you knew where we were going. For most of you, you probably would have said, okay, we're drawing a face. Let me go ahead and do it. Circle, 2 at the top, 1 in the middle, half circle, done. Boom. Because you knew the end result. For those big picture people of mine on the call, you're like, you told me the goal, let me hit run for it. For those of you who would want the details, you would want me to tell you a little bit more. But we have that clear vision. It's very important for your employees to be engaged, to be happy, because they want to know that they play a part of something bigger. And they can only play a part of something bigger if they know what the vision is. I'm going on a trip. I know what my end destination is. Few of us jump in the car and say, you know what? We're just going to go for a drive. We're taking a trip. I don't know where we're going, don't know how long we're going to be gone, but we're just driving. If you have young children in the car, you definitely don't do that, because about 5 minutes in, you get, where are we? Are we going? How long? When are we going to be there? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? I'm bored. She's touching me. So you have to have that insight in mind when you start off with it. It's the same with a company. If your team doesn't know where they're going, they're going to lose track. It's not accountable, it's not measurable, and you're going to have your employees going, why are we doing this? Are we there yet? Why am I still working on this project? And then engaged employees, happy employees are empowered. I love when you think about it as we're a family. A family has ownership. We're not always going to get along, but we've all got our roles to play. Empower your employees and let them know that when it's okay to fail. There's going to be times when you say, okay, this mistake is too big. We can't ignore it. That's happened a time or two with me working in the bank as a leader. A teller was out an enormous amount of money, and it was over the limit, and there was no choice. There was no recovery from that. But I would always tell my employees, unless you give away too much money, it's something that can be fixed. When you empower your employees to know that it's okay to make mistakes in the areas that it's okay to make mistakes, they're going to know that they have the freedom to innovate, to be that driving force, to understand I can think outside of the box, or I can think of new processes to be more efficient to help us reach our goal. Now you have torn out that root of I'm just a number to move forward to now I'm empowered. I have something of value to add to this company, and my leaders and senior leadership recognize that. And when we feel valued, when we feel like we have a voice, we want to put our best foot forward. We want to give everything that we can. And I love that. Absolutely. As leaders, we have to be aware of our strengths and weaknesses. If you don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are, I strongly urge you to find out. Omnia offers that behavioral assessment that will tell you these are your strengths and challenges as a leader. Once you understand that, then you can learn that self-awareness. You can start growing. You can be engaged in yourself and your personal development, and that will help engage your employees. And thank you for sharing. It's not always necessary. I'm a verbal thinker. It's necessary for me to make sure I don't leave the impression with my employees that a discussion is not always the decision. And that's a great tool. And a lot of times, some of us learn this through trial and error. I've learned that I can set really high goals and expect them yesterday. So I have to tell my team, let me know if this deadline is doable. Because if not, then I've automatically disengaged somebody because they're like, I can't do it. And if I can't do it, then why even bother? We have to adjust as leaders. We have to adjust who we are and how we communicate, especially to ensure that we have engaged employees, that we have happy employees. And when you listen to them, when you give them that opportunity to fail, I love that. Failure is not a punishment. People thrive in that environment. And if they don't, you're going to be able to see those disengaged employees much sooner. So I want to ask you, are you engaged? Do you truly show that you're engaged? Albert Schweitzer says that example is not the main thing in influencing others, it is the only thing. Are you leading? Are you emulating the engagement that you want your employees to follow? Because if you don't, rarely do employees lead past their leader. They follow. So if you're not engaged, how can you expect your team to be engaged? How can you expect them to be a part of it? So, real quick, do you think Phil disengagement is permanent? Yes, no, I'm on the fence. And is it easy to spot when someone is disengaged? Absolutely. Disengagement is not permanent. Many of you are absolutely correct. You can coach and motivate them to their personality. Sometimes disengagement has nothing to do with their job. It goes back to, as a leader with connecting, do you care about them? Because if you care about them, you're able to know some of the things that's going on. And we say, leave your personal life at the door. But that doesn't really happen all the times, especially with those generations, the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, who are becoming that sandwich generation where they're caring not only for their children, but for their parents as well. And I'm not saying that we can use that to ignore and excuse certain behaviors, but sometimes you have to understand when disengagement is situational and when it's permanent. And I agree, Lori. If it was easy to spot those that were disengaged, it'd be way easier. There's some that you're like, okay, they're disengaged, they're act disengaged because the signs are very, very obvious. They're doing things like calling in. They're now isolating themselves. I used to go to lunch with everybody, or I come in, close my office door, and don't talk to anyone until the end of the day. Their productivity declines. They have a bad attitude. Maybe they come in dressed a little bit nicer and take lunches at unusual times. Could be a very obvious indication that they are actively disengaged. I am heading out the door. I am on interviews. I can't wait to get out of here. But there's some of those more subtle signs as well. And it speaks to that with those that you think are engaged are actually not engaged. So look for some of these subtle warning signs to see if you've lost that engagement, you've lost that influence with your team. Maybe they've stopped volunteering. They're now watching the clock. I I come in at 8:30 exactly. I leave at 5:30 exactly. I always take an hour lunch break, where in the past it was, can you come in, a few minutes early? They stayed a few minutes late. They did what needed to be done to drive the business. Maybe there's some increased questioning, complaining, or sarcasm. And I want to touch on sarcasm a little bit because I say I have a PhD in sarcasm. Love it. It's part of my quirky humor at times, but is someone using sarcasm as a form of being snarky and showing their disengagement? Yep, here they come in late again. So someone could become disengaged, not because of anything that they're doing, but because the team is not being influenced by the leader. Other people on the team is showing up late, who's not doing all the work. Maybe that sarcasm is stemming from feeling overwhelmed and overworked because they're your top performer and you know that you can give them everything and they'll get it done. Great. Another project. Yeah, I'll get right on it after the next other 50 projects you've given. We have to be very cautious because some of that situational disengagement comes from us depending on those engaged employees too much. And I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but we have to make sure that we're working on that. And there's a difference between looking at the clock and um, watching it as in, okay, I've got 2 more minutes before I can get out of here. Woohoo! I am fast paced, big picture, people say I'm organized. I laugh because if I don't take care of something right then and there, I have a great tendency to overextend myself. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to get it all done? Where do we go from there? Like, there's a difference between I've got pressure to get things done and I can't stand to be here, but I'm here because I'm punching a clock. We need to make sure that we are understanding that we're looking for these signs of disengagement and then begin to influence those employees, connecting with them. Maybe it's something as simple as saying, hey, Kim, I know you've been doing a great job. And you've gone above and beyond. Can we go to lunch? I want to just talk with you. Thank you for everything you've been doing and get your ideas on some workflow. Maybe it's that as a leader, you know that you have some problems, some disengaged employees who are there, who shouldn't be there, but we let them ride because it's easier to ignore them. That's just the way they are, than address it. You're going to lose great people because mediocrity is okay. So let's look at our leadership style. Let's take a step back and say, let's have a conversation about this. Let's set some measurable goals in place to say you are not meeting the expectations here, here, and here. What can I do to assist you? And then hold them accountable. Remember, empower them as you connect with them to have that failure. But don't take ownership of their lack of engagement. What I mean by that is sometimes it is the manager. Maybe you have to go back and repair some bridges. I've given you too much. We had a disagreement. I handled something badly. But what we need to do is to say, let's start anew. Let's have some conversation. Let's create a plan and then move forward with it. We have to share our expertise and that influence. So the only way someone can become a leader is if we teach them how to be a leader. It all starts with us. So that influence and that engagement starts with the leader. It starts with recognizing those people who have some of those leadership qualities because we've all known leaders who don't have that title sometimes. Going back to the generational a little bit, so we have that traditional, talk about the traditionalists. And the baby boomers. They've been with the company for years. They know the ins and outs. They know all the unspoken guidelines. What motivates them? Well, first, ask them. Communicate with them. If you can't, then once you start doing that, you may find like they're bored. Like, I've been doing this job for 10 years. I've got about 5 more years in the workforce. I'm planning on retiring, but I'm really bored with doing the same thing. Great. That opens that whole conversation for you to begin to exercise your influence to engage them. Would you be willing to coach some of the newer sales team and or start introducing them to your client? Maybe it's what do you want to do? It empowers them to do something in the community that represents your company very, very well. Maybe it's doing that reverse. They want to learn. So you have these millennials who are so tech savvy, especially with social media. Maybe they're teaching other people on their team. So you do some lunch and learns and say, hey, we have Joe from IT who's going to come on and talk about social media or how the difficulties with your computers. Let them know. And that's not a generational thing. Trust me, I am computer stupid at times. I've had to have my 20-year-old daughters show me Instagram and then Twitter. Okay, why is it only 140 calories or characters? Hashtag pound sign. Don't understand the difference. They're the same thing. But by pulling your team together, you recognize their strengths. That's the leader. You allow that influence to come on, and then they can share their level of experience. You're celebrating their success and you're driving them to share those successes with the rest of the team that drives your business. It creates ownership. Once again, I'm engaging you because you are a valuable part of the company. You have strengths, you have challenges, and we want that. No one's perfect. Engagement takes work, and there may be times that you have that very hard work of saying, you know what, this may not be the best place for you. Maybe we need to look at a different company. It's nothing personal, but if you're not happy here, I have a saying, I spend more time with my work family than I do at home, waking hours. If I'm not happy at work, if I can't have fun at work, if we can't work together for a common goal, then why am I wasting my time? No one wants to look back 10, 15, 20 years and say, man, the life was sucked out of me. Why did I stay there? But as a leader, you can engage them. You can make sure, one, that you're hiring the right person, having that stringent hiring process, talking with people, saying, hey, this is what we're looking for. Here is our vision. Can you commit to our vision? Do you want to be a part of it? And then for those employees that are disengaged, maybe you do a company survey to say, hey, what's going on? Let me get some feedback. Omnia offers one. Let me find out who's engaged and disengaged. Why are you disengaged? Sometimes it's anonymous. It's anonymous. People will tell other people many things. I've come into companies, hey, let's have some conversation. And the things I'm told was very, very fixable by leadership. And it increased their productivity, it decreased their turnover rate, and it increased their employee engagement. It all comes down to you as a leader. What are you willing to do to guide, to direct, to connect, to influence, and engage? And don't worry, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to say, oh, I wish, I was better. Um, but it's okay. We'll get there. So go ahead, open it up if you have any questions. Let me type them in now. We have a few minutes left. Terry is asking, is employee satisfaction an outcome of engagement? Are employees engaged because they are satisfied? I think it's a cycle. Honestly, it starts off with that outcome of, do you create a culture of employee engagement? Do you stay from the moment of posting your position? Are you clear about what is expected of your employees and what that culture is? Then do you do what you say and say what you do? And are you willing to adapt? Zappos and Amazon is a great example of that. When they hire someone, they after 2 weeks of training, they offer them a cash bonus if they quit. It used to be 500. I think Zappos has bumped it up to 2,000 now because 500 wasn't enough money. And they said we would rather them quit within 2 weeks and take the hit early than have someone who's not engaged. And sometimes satisfied employees, that employee engagement is going to change. You may find that it comes and goes. There's a lull in the business cycle. There's changes in processes and procedures. There's change in leadership. All of that is going to affect that employee engagement. But how are we going to move forward with it, and how are we going to turn it around so that we can change it from 69% disengaged, where we're throwing away 70% of our payroll, to 70% engaged. And then 30%, we've got to go. Go ahead, type in any questions that you may have. Want to let you know that we do have the downloads, the high cost of unhappy employees, the presentation. If you want more information about our company culture survey, let us know. It'll give you some great insight into what your employees really think about your company. And then tips for coaching through the generations. I know that we talked briefly about the generational. A lot of it is behavioral as well, but we have just a quick handout that gives you some tips and tools to say, how can I work with the baby boomers, the Gen X, and the millennials? Once again, it's just one of those quick handouts to give you some ideas. If you have any other questions, please go ahead and type them in. I know that we do have an upcoming webinar, 7 things you need to do to develop your team, on October the 8th. One question the handout, you can download it. It is at the very top under the takeaways. Download here. Tips for coaching the generations. Feel free to download any of those files. You have complete access to it. Also, just want to leave you with one final statement. I know we focused a lot on the leadership. Remember, the leader drives the bus. Whether you lead a department, whether you lead a company, whether you're the owner of your company, you are the leader. You can affect lasting employee change. And if you happen to have a leader who may not be great, think about what engages you. What's that internal factor? What are those behaviors that drive you? And ask yourself, am I getting it? Can I get it in a different department? And I encourage you, if you are not a leader and you're attending, to share your thoughts, because the only way a leader's going to be able to affect change is if change is recommended in a respectful manner. Know that we have a couple of other people typing in questions. Love that final thought. Remember, leaders, your mood sets the team's mood. Absolutely. So if you're down, they're down. If you're they're And 9 times out of 10, whatever the leader is, if you're at an engaged of 10, typically your employees will never be at that same level. They're usually 1 to 2 levels below. So if you're at a 10, they're engaged at a 8. If you're at a 5, they're engaged at a 3. If you're at a 1, then you have some negative engagement, which means it's disengagement. I want to thank you for spending time with us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. My information is there, kbussey@omniagroup.com. As I said, we have our next webinar coming up October the 8th. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and for listening. And once again, if they're disengaged, they're not going to get engaged. Sometimes you may have to say, thank you, but find another job. But hopefully you're going to be able to turn it around. Have a wonderful day. On behalf of Carrie and I and Omnia, thank you for joining us.